Okay, so we've got our pump bracket bolted down to the back side of the transmission to provide enough support for that pump so it's just not hanging off of the PTO. We've got our pressure line hooked up, which is on this side, suction lines on the other side, and then we have them neatly tied up so that they don't get caught down in the drive shaft. What I used was orange lay flat hose, manure hose, just to kind of protect the hose there so that we're not going to chafe on the bottom of that cross member. Now somebody asked in the last video, what are we lubing that PTO with, being that it's up on top of the transmission? Unlike your other transmissions where your PTO is on the bottom and it gets direct oil from the transmission, this one being on the top, you have to hook up a lube line. There's a 1/4 inch hydraulic hose that comes to the PTO there, and that's what lubes the bearings. And we'll roll in underneath the transmission here, and what that is getting is oil from the actual pump on the transmission, which is a port that you take out on this left hand side of the tranny. It's right there. Make sure I get it in view. A lot of times I can't see what's going on this camera, but it's a number 4 plug that you pull out of the transmission, and then you hook that 90-degree fitting in there, and you run your oil line up to the PTO. Now we're running air controls right now going to the valve assembly on the other side. And I had somebody say, you know, why don't you just put that valve body right up in the cab so that you can run these controls inside the cab. And another person said, you know, we have controls that are in the cab, air controls. Well, that's what this one's going to have as well. I've got these handles on here so you can operate this from the ground too. If you're unloading corn or grain or something into an auger or a blower, you can raise the hoist from here. We can run the winch and the tailgate. Now we've got everything apart in this cab, and I have been looking for a spot to run these little toggle air switches to. There's nothing, no openings in the dash, not enough room where I could put the toggle switches for the hoist, tailgate, winch, and that on the dash. I thought about removing that cigarette the ashtray and mounting something between these 2 cup holders, and that just wasn't going to look pretty. I've got a console there that I was going to put right in the center on the floorboard, but that kind of eats up your access panel to the transmission. I didn't like that. I was in here this morning just a little bit ago, and I said to Jared, I said, well, what do you think of that console? That doesn't look too bad. Ain't no different than a shifter being there. He said, why don't you just put it up in the headliner? So we broke open into the headliner there, and we're going to run the toggle switches up there. We can run the air hoses over through the headliner, down this corner post here, across this floorboard, and we can run it out the bottom, the hoses out the bottom of the cab, and bring them over to the shift cylinders that are on the valve body assembly. I've got to put one more shift cylinder on number 3 valve here, which is for the winch. I've got to get that shift cylinder on there yet, and then we'll show you what this bracket is looking like. I've got a mess of stuff everywhere, but this is the panel here that, well, this is the panel that I took off, and this is the panel that I just made here now. And what we'll do is we'll drill holes, we'll set our toggle switches in there. I've got a couple more set in here somewhere. Here we go, right here. So we've got our 3 toggle switches, and then we've got our switch for the unlocking mechanism on the tailgate. We're going to set that up like that. Now 2 of these air controls are detended. In other words, you return them to neutral, and then you can run the air control and it'll hold in position either up or down. We really don't need it in the up position to hold it up, but it's nice to be able to just flip your two switches for your tailgate and your box and just let everything down. So these two are detent, and this one here, it doesn't detent. This is for the winch because we won't want to leave that locked on. You'll just want to bump that. And then of course this is the air control here to open and close the locking mechanism on the tailgate. So we'll get those switches all laid out appropriately on this panel. We'll paint it, then we'll mount everything up into the headliner there, run all our air hoses over and through down the frame, and we'll just start hooking them up, and then hopefully we can start cleaning up some of this mess here. I've got to get this fender back on, but I didn't know where we were going to end up with running the air controls, and I didn't know if I'd have to access that left-hand side of the firewall there, but there is no spot that I can break through to have put these air switches anywhere. I thought about just making a bracket up somewhere. It just was going to look gaudy, and that's what we're going to do. So let me get this bracket here made, and then we'll get that mounted in there, and then we can start putting this dash back together and start cleaning up some of this stuff here. Okay, so we have all of our airlines run now that are going to go to the air shift cylinders that are on the hydraulic valve. And I've also got two lines that are going to run back to the air locks on the tailgate. Now we've got the interior just about all put back together. The dash is all back together. I took this corner post molding off, and we were able to run the air lines up through the top of the cab up into the airliner, or up into the headliner. So what we have here is a 3/8 line. That's going to supply our air to a manifold that's going to feed these 3 toggle switches and a air lock for the tailgate. I ended up drilling a hole through the floor, and what I used is a marker light grommet, and then I put silicone all around that just to kind of keep it glued in there, because the floor is kind of curved there a little bit. So we've got that all glued in, and then what we can do is just fill this with silicone, and it's going to be all right. We can stuff it with rubber or something, but we've got our air lines all up in there. Now what we need to do is we need to grab our backing plate, or our instrument panel, or toggle switch panel, whatever you want to call it. I cut this piece of steel here to match the piece that was on the headliner. You could probably put a CB up in there or something. So we've got a piece of metal all made, got our toggle switches. This will be for the box. This one will be for the tailgate. Up is up, down is down. We'll have this one here for the winch, which this one does not have a detent to it. So in other words, once you push it and let it go, it returns to neutral. And then of course we have our switch for the air locks on the tailgate. What we're using for a manifold is this bar here. You can get these as you can get them like 8 units long, and this one's actually got a spot for 8. We only need 4, and we've got 4 plugged, and then we've got a supply coming in here on the one end. You can get these here pretty cheap. The other way to do it is bring an air line up in, come off with a T, and then come out of that T and keep jumping around, but that gets expensive. So we'll hook this up in the headliner, and then we'll have to bring each air supply off of that, plug into this panel here, and then we'll have to run air out of each one of those toggle switches so we know which one is which on the side of the frame here. Now, all I had was black air tubing. you can get this air tubing and you can get it in different colors. And I should have just had, you know, all different colors, which I have airline ordered for the other 2 trucks that'll be different colored, and we can just hook it all together up in the cab up there, and then it's not going to matter which air hose we use after the fact, as far as what color. We can just run, you know, one color to this one, another color to that one, and so on and so forth on down the line. So we'll go ahead and put our panel up in the headliner, show you what that looks like, and then we'll have to figure out which airline goes where by supplying it with air and just doing one at a time and going down the line there. All right, we've got our panel all into place. We got the headliner pieces all put back up on there. I was worried that these air hoses were going to fit a little tight along here. I thought I'd have to run a couple here, a couple there, and just kind of scatter them, but I had them all grouped together and they ran right along through here. Down this corner post, we were able to get this piece of plastic secured and back on there. Then they come down on this side of the firewall, and then we drilled a hole down through the floor there earlier, and we ran a grommet style marker light, the rubber piece. We filled that in. We drilled a 2 and a, what did I do, a 2 1/4 inch hole or a 2 1/2. That's protecting the sharp metal, and then we've got the airlines run up through it, and then I just kind of filled it in with silicone to kind of seal up the bottom of the cab, and then that gives the hoses a little bit of support in that wide open hole. We've got a floor piece to put on here yet, but we're gonna wait till that silicone dries. We've got them airlines coming down through along the bottom of the floorboard there, across the top of the frame. We've got them hooked into the loom holders here, and then we've got to get some zip ties tying these hoses down, and then we've got them hooked up into the appropriate valves here on this valve body plate. Where we're getting the air from is this air tank. We're supplying the manifold with a 3/8 airline right off that air tank. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start plumbing this valve body. I keep saying that in each segment of the video here, but we've got everything done on the front end. Now we need to work our way back through, and yeah, so a lot of this stuff took a lot of time just trying to plan all this stuff out, but the next 2 trucks are going to be real nice and easy. We've got our fender back on there. The cracks that we glued in with the 3M panel bonding material there, you can barely see it, but it's all nice and strong. We'll see how well that holds. So right now we're going to work on making up some hoses for the hoist and get some hoses plumbed back for the tailgate. All right, we've got everything in the cab all completely put back together. I just put this molding piece back on the floor here, the tread plate or what have you, whatever you want to call it. We've got the hoses coming up through and in behind there like you've seen, and up through the corner post. Got them coming down in underneath the cab, and they're in the loom holders. Everything is zip tied coming over to our shift cylinders that are on the valve here. I've got the valve all completely plumbed in. All the hoses are hooked up. We've got a gauge set on here so that we know what the system pressure is, because there's a relief valve here that we'll have to set once we get the hydraulics up and going. We don't want to deliver any more than 3,100 psi to the hoist, and we can run that relief pressure from this main relief here. We've got flow control valves for our tailgate so that we can slow the tailgate down. You just turn these dials here and you can speed up or slow down the speed of the tailgate. And then on this back valve here we have hoses running for the winch. Now, this is a double acting valve that we're using for the hoist because that's all I could find at the time. And we had to plumb this port back into the outlet cover here so that if the PTO is in gear and you're running the pump and you go to put the hoist down, you're not going to be powering, well, it's going to be powering this port, but it's just going to return it back to the tank rather than deadheading this valve here. So we've got a bracket made up on the frame. I've got to secure the hoses to it. I've got the hoses secured there. I welded a piece of 3/4 rod on the frame. We'll zip tie the hoses to that down towards the back end here. And then what I'm working at now is I'm gonna bolt on an ICC bumper just to have it on there to be legal. And then what I want to do later on when I get time is put a pintle plate on this truck, and then that'll weld to the back of the frame, and then we'll run the ICC bumper off of it. So we've got a little bit left here, and then we can start building our angle iron frame rails that are going to go on there. Now Tim and Jason have pulled this truck in here. This is the second one. They've got this flatbed just about all unbolted, and it is ready to be lifted off the truck. And then we've got another truck that we're going to be putting it onto once we get it lifted off of this one. It's sitting right outside the door there, and we'll show you that once we get working at it here. Lights are all off it, wires are all unhooked, U-bolts are all off, and then the panels, these things here that the tires come up against on forklifts, they bolt on, so we've got them taken off, and we're gonna lift this up on here, or lift this off of here in a little while. All right, we are ready to lift this off. How they make out here. That other one was stuck on there pretty good. Just got to lift. Alright, that's all setting in place. They're gonna pull it inside and U-bolt it down, hook up the lights, and they'll be able to come and pick her up. Well, Jay's got this flatbed all on this single axle International. Had to hook up the lights, put the mud flat brackets on it. He just put an ICC bumper on there. Had to put a cluster 3 on there. The one that was on this truck had a, it was broke out right there. So we ended up putting a new one of them on there. And he's just getting ready now to throw some paint on that ICC bumper. And then this one will be able to get kicked out the door here. This should make a nice unit on this truck here. This doesn't belong to Bennett Bolts, by the way. AJ bought this truck and Zach brought it over this morning. And we rolled it off the one truck and slammed it onto this one here. So this will make a nice unit for him to, he's gonna put a water tank on there, I guess. And when he's not using it to haul water, he's gonna use it to haul big bales and whatever. So it'll be a handy unit to do that with. So we're still working on the tail end of this truck, and we'll get after this, and then once we get a little more of this done, we'll show you what it looks like. I put a quick ICC bumper on this. This is going to be able to be unbolted. I want to put a pintle plate on this truck, but I just don't have the time to do that right now. So everything that we've got on there is just bolted on. We'll be able to take it off. I ended up repurposing the hooks that were on the tail end of the frame when it was out here. So we ended up reaming this bottom hole for the cross member, drilled another one right there, and then in the event that Sarah gets stuck, we'll at least be able to hook onto the back of it. We obviously aren't going to be able to hook onto this bumper. It's just not heavy enough. So we'll keep after it here, and we'll join up with you in a little while here. Well, Jason's got the bumper painted, and as you can see, we've been getting some rain here, so he's going to put it over in one of the other buildings, and they're going to come and pick it up tomorrow. Okay, we have everything done on the truck, from the PTO and the pump right on back through to the tail hinge and the hose hookups for the tailgate and the winch and whatever else like that for when we put the body on. I just brought the angle iron in. There's 2 pieces laying on the floor there, and there's some cross member pieces laying on a 6x6 over there. We're going to start on that tomorrow. Now what we ended up finishing up on here today is we ended up hooking all these hoses up. We've got the hoist valve right here, got the tailgate valve in the middle, and then we've got the winch valve as the third one on the end. We put a gauge on there just so that I haven't got to plumb a gauge in and take it off later on. We don't normally put these on, but it is a good idea. We've got all our hoses routed well so that they won't chafe against the frame. I ended up putting a piece of lay flat hose over the hydraulic hoses, zip tied it. I've got a bracket made. It's got 2 of these things on there to hold the hoses in place so that they don't rub against the frame. And then we brought them up over the top of this cross member to keep it away from the cross member. We put 2 of them on here, and then we ran a 3/4 rod down across the cross members, zip tied the hoses to it. We put another protector piece here just so that if the hoses get down on the top of these bolts, it'll somewhat protect them. That rear end is not going to come up into this area where the hoses are. There's only about 6.5 inches worth of travel there, and it's not going to bother it. We ended up putting the grab hooks back on here from what was on the tail end of the frame, just because we don't really have anything heavy duty here to hook onto in the event that the truck gets stuck. So we ended up reaming a hole, 3/4 inch hole on the back side of where this cross member is bolted. I drilled another one, bolted that to there, and I've done the same thing here on the other side. Now, this ICC bumper, it's law to kind of have something on there because you don't want a car to go underneath the truck, but what is that really going to help anyways? We've got that just bolted on there. Like I was talking earlier, I want to put a fifth wheel, or not a fifth wheel, but a pintle hook plate on the back here, and I just don't have time to construct that now, so I thought I would just throw this on there, which I've probably got half the amount of time into this than what it would take just to put the plate on there. But at any rate, it is what it is. This is the hose hookup here for the tailgate, and then we've got a power plug to plug the body into, because the body has got lights on it. And then we've got our hoses draped up over the top here for the winch. So tomorrow we're going to be able to get welding the angle iron, and I think it's time for me to run home and get some supper here now. But that's going to do her, folks. So we'll pull this truck out of here so that we can maneuver this angle iron around here in the morning. And then what we'll end up doing is we'll have to put two pieces together up here so that we can put the pulley on there, and then we'll put a cross member in behind the hoist, and then we'll put a couple more in between there and the back end, and we'll have to have a bracket to mount the winch to, which will mount somewhere in the back here. So that's gonna do her for this video, folks. The next video will be coming at you with some welding here when we start building that angle iron frame. So I want to thank you for watching, and we will catch you at the next video.